Okay, we're gonna make some fertilizer. So right here in front of me I do have a scale, and I have a glass jar, maybe like a half gallon. I have a supply of comfrey leaves, one of my favorite plants, and I do have some sugar. But first I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about comfrey in this plant. There's a number of different plants you could use for this. What I'm going to be creating is what they call fermented plant juice, or in the Korean natural farming they refer to it as FPJ. They have a lot of acronyms, but in this situation I am using comfrey. I use comfrey for my kalo and a general fertilizer. Through my research, it looks like it contains the three major nutrients that you would purchase in fertilizers: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as well as some pesticidal qualities. But I've actually never made the fermented plant juice out of comfrey. There are videos online showing you how to do this. One of my favorite producers of videos is located on Hawaii Island, and his name is Chris Trump. He has his own YouTube channel. I don't know anything about Chris, but he seems very passionate about this practice and perpetuating it, so mahalo to him for creating those videos. But I am going to use comfrey. There are a number of different plants. One of the plants that they use is the pendulous fruit from the banana flower. So the banana flower, that purple thing that hangs, they use that and chop that up. Another one that I've seen is an uncle, he was using purslane, which, if you don't know purslane, it's actually an herbal plant. It's an edible plant. It's a ground cover. It's a flat, like, succulent. And apparently the banana flower fermented plant juice will produce a potassium rich fertilizer, and the purslane will produce a nitrogen rich fertilizer. So depending on what you're needing, and it's probably a good idea to have all of them on hand, you might want to adjust. So comfrey is my plant of choice today, and I'd like to talk about the way that I currently use it. So what I'll do is a method that I think is also featured in another type of farming, natural farming method called, it's an acronym, and it's JADAM, JADAM, and they use water to produce their fertilizers, so, which is what I do. So I'll take this leaf and I'll rip it up. I'll just tear it into pieces all the way down to the stem, and then I will fill this thing up with the leaves, and then I will fill it with water, and I let it sit for about 2 weeks. Now this process is an anaerobic process. So what that means is the bacteria that are tearing this apart, feeding on this, converting it into organic fertilizer, they don't need oxygen, and that can produce some smelly stuff. And it does stink. The fertilizer I use or create from this and use stinks. It smells like cow poop. If any of you have any cattle experience, or ranchers, or been around cows, or stepped in a cow patty, it stinks, and that's what it smells like. So it's not something you want in your house. Farming method. The fermented plant juice is completely different, and that's actually what I'm going to do today, because I've never done it and I'd really like to. The difference is that because it's a different type of process in breaking down this organic matter into a fertilizer, not only does it not stink, but it also becomes like a shelf-stable type end product. Okay, so here's the comfrey. It's all ripped up and packed in here kind of nicely. So if I were doing this my way, I would fill this container with water and put a lid on it, and set it aside out of the sun for about 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks you could open it up and you could use it using 20% of this solution to water to create a fertilizer. But that's not what we're doing today, and we're going to be mixing this with sugar, which is going to be a dry substance, and it's that osmotic process that's going to draw out the liquids from this. But in order to mix that, we need a much larger container. This is a 2-gallon, I believe, glass jar. I weighed the comfrey. It's just a little over a pound, 1 pound, 1 ounce, 1.5 ounces. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio when you do this fermented plant juice. So I need 1 pound, 1.5 ounces of sugar. And the guy who lives on Hawaii Island, Chris Trump, he always encourages to put, it's okay to put a little more, and at the end we'll add even more, but so it does not have to be totally exact. Putting too much sugar will not ruin the process. Okay, so I put this jar on and I zeroed it out to remove the weight of the jar. So now I'm just going to dump this in there. That's a lot of coal. And you just want to massage it in. You really want it to coat all of the plant matter. I'm not trying to squeeze it, but I don't know if you noticed this, but I did rip it and I did damage it. Cutting it might have been a better choice, and I will learn as I go, because I think I'm that smart. But ripping it, kind of clumped some of this stuff together. As you can see, I piled leaves on top of one another and just ripped them all up. So that might not have been the best practice, but just take your time. There's no rush, and you just want to coat all of the organic matter. Now, like I mentioned, I'm using this is an organic unrefined sugar. I think turbinado is one of the terms I've seen. The granule size of this is not nearly as fine as brown sugar, and I was wondering if there would be any issues in not using the brown sugar that they use, and I couldn't think of any, but I'm looking at the granular size, and it may be easier with the brown sugar to coat everything. Just kind of massaging it in lightly. Now, this is not going to be ready today. This is going to take a while, but we will use this in the weeks ahead as we talk about plant maintenance. And it looks like most of the sugar has been mixed in with the comfrey. So at this point, I am going to transfer this back into this smaller container. Now, I hope it'll fit, and if it doesn't, I might just press it down. And hopefully it'll all fit inside there. So I think that's kind of mixed up. Once again, I've never done this, so this is going to be a learning experience, so no scared. Come learn with me. If you can make your own fertilizer at home, it's organic, it saves you money, why not? Produces onomea-ai, or delicious foods, keeps your plants healthy and happy. So not being infected with bugs and diseases is a win-win. So there's the comfrey, and the final step in this is to add a little bit more sugar on top as kind of like a cap or a lid, and that you just kind of push to the outer edges. And they claim that, or this guy claims that this helps regulate some of the oxygen, and it's his practice, and he ends up with a nice product at the end. So I'm kind of trusting this guy, and I'll determine whether that was a good call at the end of this. So there's a little bit of sugar on top. So now we're going to clean up a jar, container, and remove as much of the sugar as possible. Because we're using sugar, ants love sugar, so, and roaches, and they'll probably all show up. But you can see it already. There's actually some liquid happening at the bottom already. So now we want to put a lid on this. He recommends not using cloth, something like this, or a rag. He says that it collects moisture and molds, and I'll tell you what, I used a cloth to ferment my kombucha, and it was okay for a while, and I was able to produce kombucha, but then some funky stuff started happening, and got some stuff growing on there, and it might have had to do with me using a rag, and maybe the rag being contaminated with something. So I'm going to use paper on this, and we'll see what happens. So that is basically it. He recommends that this be really nice and tight to keep ants from getting in there. I'm gonna have to find a different piece of paper, but doesn't quite allow me to get all the way around. But 5 to 7 days, you just keep an eye on it, and this should all melt down, and you should have a liquid in there. So another method he talks about in making this, because after this is melted down, it's completed the fermentation, and this has a liquid, we're going to extract that liquid by filtering it. And he uses a funnel with a screen at the bottom of the funnel. It doesn't take much work to set what he uses up. But another method he talked about was some sort of strainer bag. This is, I think they call it a milk bag. I bought this at the health food store in Kapa'a. I use this to make my ava. It's pretty heavy duty. Well, heavy, it's pretty good quality. But you would want to put this inside the container before you filled it with the plant material and the sugar. And then that way, when it came time to strain the solids out, you could just lift this out, wring it, let the fluids drip inside, and it would make it a little easier, I think, and maybe a little quicker. But that's it. And it wasn't too hard. Didn't take a ton of financial resources, and I'm really looking forward to using this on my plants. Once again, some of the benefits of doing the fermented plant juice versus the method I'm currently using is this doesn't stink. It's not supposed to stink. The fermentation process is not a stinky process. If it's stinking, there's something going wrong, and which is a good indicator of something going wrong. This also can be diluted quite a bit more, so the amount that I make here will make a lot more. So if you're limited on space, this might be a real good way of going about creating your fertilizers. And you could be using things that are labeled weeds in your yard, plants that you're discarding and throwing on the side, depending on what kind of weeds and plants you're discarding. They could be converted into a fertilizer. And this can also be stored on a shelf in a container after you're done. So I think it's worth giving it a try. I hope you guys give it a try and enjoy the results.